Hello, a higher note community, and welcome to another 1 thing, 30-minute expert interview. And I'm thrilled to be able to introduce the guest that I have for you today, Phillip Fox. We'll get to him in just a minute. And I started these interviews with the purpose of providing my small but growing community with both instruction and inspiration. And I think that today's interview will provide you with both. And so to launch into, to tell you a little bit more about the 30-minute interviews, I'm committed to having as much power packed into 30 minutes. And so I have a set number of questions that I'm asking each interviewee, and we're focusing on one thing in 5 different areas. And so the format's always the same, but of course, because each person is so different, you're going to hear a lot of different information and inspiration and get a lot of ideas, I hope, to inspire your own practice, whether it is vocal. I mean, my primary interest is in inspiring vocalists and equipping them, but this could also benefit any of you who are creating generally. And one of the things that our guest, Philip, today talks a lot about is artistry. So I'm sure we're going to hear that as a theme today. But so whether you are a vocalist or whether you are looking to develop your artistry in general and your creativity and trying to make that, grow that part of you or those parts of you, I really want these interviews to serve you. So please do share the interviews with friends, the form to sign up to receive the interview information and how to get the links and all that kind of stuff. If you know someone who would be interested in such interviews and information. So now let me go ahead and tell you about Phillip Fox. And you can look him up at phillipfoxmusic.com, which will go to his Patreon. We're just discussing which one that is. You'll probably hear me by default calling it Patreon because of my linguistic background, but that's whatever. I'm not trying to be fancy. I just can't snap out of it. But Phillip has a great byline, I guess you would call it. And I'm just going to read it straight off of his website because it totally brings everything together. And Phillip, I'm sure you can tell some that it probably took you a while to come up with exactly what it is that you do. But Phillip is an artist who writes and records Americana music for thinking folks with country hearts. So you have what people might consider 3 different types of genres, and how the genres overlap: Americana, folk, country. Okay, but they do have a lot of overlap, and I can see how those circles can have a lot that meet in the middle, and that's where Phillip lives. So, and where he creates. So now Phillip and I met in Delaware, Ohio, which is where my family lived for 7 years. And Phillip and his wife Melissa moved there with their, at the time, 1 child, if I'm remembering correctly. And I think y'all have 2 now, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And we were attending the same church, and Phillip quickly, of course, began to help sometimes lead with the worship team, and I heard him sing in concert with some friends of mine. And so I've heard Phillip just from time to time. And now Phillip has some very interesting stuff going on online, which I think will give a lot of you who are growing your presence, growing your artistry. He's got some things that he's doing online that I think are very creative and very cutting edge for making a living with your art, and or simply getting your art out there so more people are exposed to it. So Phillip is an artist, as I've said. His wife Melissa is a nurse. He just told me today, and And without further ado, I'm going to show you Philip's face, and hopefully you'll see it. Okay, there we go. Hopefully we can all see Philip now. And at times I will try to pin the video on him so that it's not flashing back and forth to me. So, Philip, hello.
Hello, Natalie.
And everyone else. So hopefully a lot of other people are going to hear you and meet you and see you and be exposed to all that you have to offer. And so anything you would like to add in terms of who you are before we launch into the 5 standard questions?
I think we'll cover more of that as we go, I suppose.
Okay, very good. All right, so question 1. Is there any one thing, a statement, a compelling message, a call, a drive, any particular encouragement that you've received, anything like that you put into that category that you can point to in your life that has compelled you to sing or driven you toward performing?
Yeah, for me, it's always been about the internal benefit and joy that I get from making music. Actually, the story of most of my life has been direct discouragement toward me doing that. And so all I've had when I look at, the last 20 plus years of me writing, recording, performing music, the thing I keep coming back to, and the reason I continue to do it, is because of the internal benefit that I get. When I first discovered guitar at 12, I almost immediately started writing terrible, terrible things, but it was cathartic for me and therapeutic for me. And honestly, initially it was not intended to like something to be shared. But when you're 16 years old and can play guitar a little bit, then all of a sudden you find yourself in garage bands, and then, just kind of goes from there. So
So did you play in garage bands and such?
I did. Yeah. I started playing in my first band actually at 15. And by my senior year in high school, the band I had, we were gigging a couple of days a week in the tri-state area, on the local Christian radio station, that kind of a thing.
That's really neat. That's kind of a cool young start. It's very cool. All right. What is one thing, whether it falls under the category of mindset or a specific aspect or approach to training, a strategy before, during, or after performance, or whatever, a training bit, I guess, that has shaped your approach to the practice of singing?
Yeah, I think as I thought about this question, one of the things that has been most helpful for me is understanding the difference between skill and talent. As a society, we sort of worship talent, just to define those two, talent is like the innate ability to do something, and it works as a multiplier for discipline. Whereas skill is the ability you have to do something. So the way I look at it is skill equals dedicated time to the factor of talent. So the more talent you have, the less time you have to put in order to develop a certain skill set. Like you've been in Nashville for 5 minutes, you understand that not everyone has the same talent factor. For me, I think I was probably in my mid-20s when I realized I was not a high talent factor individual. As I got exposed to more people, visited more places, New York, LA, Nashville, even overseas a little bit, I realized there's a lot more people that have a lot more talent than me. So I could take that as a discouragement and just stop. But what I've realized over the years is that for me, it's not about being the most talented. For me, it's about being as skilled as I can be. And what I have seen over these 20 years is that a lot of those high talent people, they actually stop for lots of reasons, and no shame in that. But what I have developed as a skill set over 20 years with I'd say probably average talent quotient, is actually a very high skill set. Just from an industry standpoint. Certainly there are those that have much higher skill sets, but mine is very functional, very usable, and frankly, it's just a matter of continuously working over decades in a direction, utilizing the talent that I have to develop a skill. So for me, when I think about what I'm working on, it's just really helpful to be able to appreciate those that are like just crazy talented, those that have developed a crazy skill, and then also recognizing what I have to work with and being okay with offering what it is that I have in the moment right now.
That's so good. That is so, I'm going to put this back on gallery view. That is so, I feel critical for any artist to hear, because we all struggle with that. Well, very few of us don't struggle with, who cares what I have to offer? Aren't there 10,000 other people who can sing or play or act or whatever it is better than I can? And I learned a lesson actually through writing, not music, but writing. I received what I felt like was a call from God to write a book that utilized my seminary background to benefit women. And I had never written anything of any kind of magnitude before. And so people would ask me, oh, are you a writer? And I'm like, oh, well, I'm not really writing. I'm not a writer. I'm just writing this book. And what my cohort at the time really nailed into me was, you know what? It is not, the writer is not the one who talks about writing. The writer is not the one who has a talent for writing. The writer is the one who sits their butt in the chair and writes, and keeps doing that and developing that. And then the big thing, put it out there. Put it out there like that, because you can write and write and write. And that can mean that you're a writer, right? But if you don't put it out there, then nobody hears or sees or whatever it is, experiences or benefits from what it is that you've been contributing. So yes, and Lord knows there's plenty of really good, there's plenty of artists out there that are making mega bucks. They can't sing worth beads. Like, they're so auto-tuned, it's ridiculous. But they keep showing up, and they're creative, and they're coming up with different stuff, so, and there's a follower for every person who wants to put their stuff out there. there's probably lots of followers. So I hope, instead of feeling like, oh, well, that's, that means that I can put out crap. I mean, it's not what I'm saying. It just means that I like how you said it. I just want to strive to be the best that I can be and keep offering that to those who want to have it, right? So that's, all right, love it. Anything you want to add in response to what I just said?
No.
Okay, all right. Okay. What is one thing, either a concept or a tip or a call to action or some type of suggested approach to practice, specific exercise, inspirational thought, anything, okay, connected to your area of particular expertise? And this for you could be the singing part, because people don't know this, okay? And we were going to talk a little bit about this, and I forgot to bring this up at the very beginning. Before you answer this question, Philip, why don't you tell us, you told us about the garage bands, but tell us about your professional life, because that was where you were being paid to sing as a teenager. After that, you went on the road, like you did the business, you did the thing, you went from town to town, you did the whole deal. So tell us a little bit about your journey as a professional artist.
Yeah, so in my late 20s, I took the leap and started doing music full time. And over the course of 6 years, played in, 30 some states, played almost 600 shows with my band, Phillip Fox Band. And yeah, we recorded 2 albums. We were on the radio, did TV interviews, like we did the thing, we did the things, all the things. And we were completely self-managed. We traveled around in a van, like, we were never like stars. But what I discovered actually in doing it was that actually is the 95% of the working class musicians in the country. That's their existence, right? And so we did that. I learned some really critical lessons in just sort of taking the plunge and doing that. One of them, which is the answer to this next question, which is, so like I said at the very beginning, my experience with pursuing music and writing was always sort of pushing upstream against, first it was my parents, and then it was my class advisors, and then it was society as a whole. You're just like constantly pushing against these messages that what you're doing doesn't matter, it'll never work, you'll never make money, it doesn't, just stop basically and do something useful. So in sort of taking all that and then doing this full time, I guess the message was like, if you're going to do music, these are the things you have to do, right? You have to record an album, and then you have to go play a bunch of shows, and then you have to do PR, and then, and then you do it all over again. And you just kind of this entertainment industry cycle. So I did that for 6 years. And after 6 years of that, I realized that I was spending literally 90 to 95% of my time doing all of these things that I didn't love so that I could get to the 5 or 10% of the time doing the things that I do love, which after 6 years of doing it, realized for me, it was, I love to write new music and I love to record that music. Those are the life-giving things for me. Everything else in the music industry, the performing, the interviews, the, booking, the endless promotion, those things were all life draining. So after 6 years, realizing like, okay, we've, for lots of reasons, we all agreed like, it's time to just be done with the band specifically. One of the guys went on to end up, he was touring internationally for a couple of years after that. He continued on in the industry. Myself, I just got out entirely. That's when we moved up here to Delaware. And so, for a year, I just sat in this like, well, I have this thing that I do because I love it. And I don't know, in a world of Spotify and YouTube where no one pays for music really, how do I make this thing, this medium that I have, like how do I even do that? How do I present that? Or is it just for me? And in wrestling through that and walking through posthumously the 6 years of doing it full time, I realized a really critical distinction. And that is that I was an artist and I was not a craftsman, which are two completely, they're very different things. If we think of the analogy of building a house, right? An architect starts with a green field and out of nothing imagines something in that space. And that is the work of the artist. The artist starts with nothing, imagines something, and brings that thing into being conceptually. Another analogy that I've used to describe this is, if we think of a bullseye, a craftsman can hit a bullseye that not everybody can hit. That's why we practice our scales, right? That's why we practice with the metronome. But an artist hits a target that no one else can see. That's what artistry is. It's about vision. It's about bringing something into being that no one else can see or hear. So being in the music industry, I realized, wow, there are a ton of really highly skilled craftsmen, but if they don't have a blueprint to work around, then they're actually kind of lost in their craft. And that's what I've realized is, as an artist, that's what I bring is my greatest talent, and consequently, because I've developed it for 20 years, my greatest skill now is hearing what no one else can hear. And so in the delivering of that, now how do I take what I've heard and make it so you can hear it, right? Like I tell people all the time, I don't record music so that I can hear it. I already hear it. I hear more music than I can ever record in my life.
Right.
I record a song so that you can hear it and everyone else watching this can hear it and my neighbor can hear it. That's why I take the time to record music. And so in that recording, I utilize Craftsman a lot because I want a really great bass player to play that line. Not a great bass player. I want a really to play, right? So it's the same sort of thing. Like I envision a blueprint and then I will hire out craftsmen to frame that house and then, put in the windows and do the finishing trim and, all of those sorts of things.
That is such an interesting distinction. I've never thought about it that way. For myself, I would definitely fall on the craftsman side because I have always struggled to write music. Struggled. Like, I don't hear it. I have friends that like, it never stops. It never stops coming in. And I just write it down and not me, it's the sitting with the blank page, or just personally for me in my prayer times and journaling, just listening and writing feelings, right? Which is fine because that's what one of the greatest musicians ever, King David, did, right? And thinking, letting things just come. But there's no translation of that to actual music. It stays in the poetry level. Or if it does translate to music, it doesn't sound any good. But singing, like I have people come to me with tears in their eyes because they're so moved by this or that or the other. But that's taking something that someone else brought into being, and then I have owned it, so to speak. And I've tried to inhabit it and tried to make it into something new that communicates through my life experience. So there's the creative part for me, and that's the interpretation part that I teach to my students. But yes, that's folks, like, I'm just saying this, like, Philip is an artist, but according to his definition, but the craftsman part is pretty darn good. So you definitely want to go to his Patreon site, Patreon, and you definitely want to listen to some of the clips that he's got on there. For me, just, I've heard those things, but for me, it was also the live, hearing him sing live and hearing him bring those things to life. So, all right, you got to go hear him sing. It's not just an artist. There's a craftsman there too. So, all right, now let's move on unless something else is brewing.
No, that's
okay. Good. Okay. What are you working on right now? And I do want you to tell us.
I just lost your audio, Natalie.
Sorry about that. Thank you for letting me know. Okay. I do want you to tell us about the Patreon site. I want you to, I know that would fall into what are you doing now? That's been a work over the last couple of years. But that doesn't have to be your answer to this question. But I do want you to talk about that because sure. I think that is it's a real and viable solution. Do you see people who are watching this may have seen a lot of, I see Patreon on like my physical fitness trainers on YouTube. A lot of them use Patreon as their way of getting donations, like support me on Patreon and I can bring you more yoga, right? It's all good. Well, good. So I would like to see more, fine artists and just creative artistry also be supported that way. So Philip's going to tell us about that. But all right, what are you working on right now in your vocal practice and or your career? And okay, I'll add on after you answer. I'll add on if there's something else I want to know.
Yeah, those two things kind of go hand in hand. I guess just continuing that story arc of taking that year off and trying to figure out who I am and what I was going to do with this gift that I have. a songwriter that I had followed for years, named Hayes Carl out of Texas, had started a Patreon. And I really loved his music, and he was in a similar boat that a lot of people are, where it's, well, you need 50 grand to front load an album. And so you do that, and then if you're like doing really well, you'll make that money back. But most of the time that's just money you spend, just expense, for the live show, whatever. And so he was at this place where he had all these tunes, but couldn't afford to do another album. And so he launched this Patreon, like, hey, let me demo these songs for you guys, and let's, raise some money to like do this next album. So I was like, oh, this is great. And it just hit me like, well, this is something that I could do. I produced both of the albums for my band. And so I had some like basic recording expertise, nothing super fancy, but some. And then I also would allow me, I didn't have to tour. I wouldn't have to, gig regularly. I could connect with people virtually around a time schedule that worked with my kids. So I could stay home with my kids, sleep in my bed every night, see my wife, and still make music. That was like the idea, right? Just like, let's try this.
You can have it all.
Well, so I launched
in some ways.
Right. I could at least give some time to the areas of my life that I felt needed time. Those were the things, like my wife, my kids, my neighborhood, and then my spiritual relationship, and then like my artistry. Like those are the things that get fed every day. I need that. The world needs that. So I launched this Patreon, and so it's over 2 years now. I've released 26 songs in the last 2 years. To give you some contrast, when I had my full-time band for 6 years, we released 17 songs in 6 years. So in the last 2 years,
wow, that's a stark difference. Yes.
Yeah. And because I get to do it every month, all the time, even though I'm not doing it full time, I get to spend about 15 hours a week. My skill set with it has just improved significantly, because I'm getting to focus specifically on how to sing into a can and make it sound good on speakers, which is very different.
Yes, very good.
Which is different than standing on a stage and singing to people, and they're just different. They're just different. So what I've been focusing on now, after 2 years of doing this, is I've developed like enough of a skill set where like everything that I'm releasing is like good enough. Initially it was like, is this even like good enough for people to listen to? Is it above that threshold where you can actually hear the song and the production isn't detracting from that, right? Now I'm focusing entirely on feeling. Just what does the song feel? How does it make the listener feel? How do I translate what I was feeling when I wrote this in a way that they now feel it? And so I'm not concerning myself with the concepts of execution. Obviously I still listen to like, is this so out of pitch that it's detracting? Okay, fix that. Is this so out of time that it's detracting? Okay, fix that. But I'm not focusing on, is this in pitch? Is this in time? Do these things go together? Is this actually in the right key? Like I'm just focusing on the feeling. And so, like a song I released 2 months ago, actually a piece of that whole recording, like it hinged around this dissonance. Like there was like 3 measures of dissonance, and then it would release again. And it only did it like 2 or 3 times in the song. But my patrons, when I did the live stream release and we were talking about it, many of them were saying it gave them a feeling of uneasiness, which is exactly what you want dissonance to do, right? So that's what I've been focusing on for like the last 3 or 4 months, is just from my singing, my playing, the recording, the arrangement of the song, production of it, like how do I translate a feeling? And I'm just not concerning myself with the what's right or wrong technically.
That is really, really interesting. Like you don't think on the outset of all the different ways you can go at it and the different aspects of creativity
Mm-hmm.
that is involved in art. Like if you think about it, it's probably easier, I guess, to think about how a song makes a person feel. But I was just thinking also about like how some of the great works of art, or any work of art, that for some of them, that must be some part of their, exploration. Like, how is the viewer going to receive this, and what am I trying to evoke from them?
Mm-hmm.
That one of the great mysterious paintings, the girl with the pearl earring, like everybody's always like, what's that really about? And Mona Lisa, why is she smiling? All the like, did they start out to try to create a measure of, of that dissonance, like you're saying, like, I see this, on the surface it's serene, but there's an element of mystery that I can't get past, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's so interesting to hear you talk about it from the creator's perspective, like that, just with the goal of asking, what's this going to make a person feel? Now, marketers do this all day long, right? You think about it, like that's what they're going for. Like, what are the, not carnal, what is the what are the what is this word? I was a marketing major. You never know. So the visceral, the life things that we want. We want safety. We need food, shelter, procreation. Those kinds of things. Like, what are the things that people want, and the elements of, like, when you're advertising to somebody, what are the things you like? You want to save them time. You want to save them money, right? So those kinds of things. So they immediately start with that question in mind before they write any copy. They ask those questions, like, what am I going for here? So it is super interesting to me that you're asking this question, like, what's the person going to feel? To kind of add on to this, or piggyback on this, like, do you start with a song concept? Like, is there like a kernel of the concept first, or do you start with, what do I want to make people feel, and then comes the song concept? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So most of the time, I do not write from a standpoint of, what do I want to say to someone, or what do I want other people to feel. Most of my writing, actually, I have to experience it myself, or experience someone else going through it. And then I feel like part of the way the artistic gift manifests in me is I'm able to sort of grab emotional threads, or cosmic threads, and pull on them and bring down enough of whatever they're tied to, that I can then put it in something to present to other people, so that they can then see, feel, hear, those things as well. So, like, several months ago, there was a young mother in our community that passed away just overnight, unexpected, just, had what seemed like a common, like flu kind of a thing. And she died in the middle of the night, left behind 2 small kids and a husband, and just a community that loved her. And so I was asked to come play a couple songs at the memorial service. And I did not know these people. I did not know any of their family. It was just, we were in the same community, and the folks that were putting on the memorial service asked me to come do this just as a service to the family. So I did that. And so I felt like that space was a really holy space. And in fact, me doing anything other than just singing the songs I was asked to do, and then sort of step aside and just observe, would have been like just inappropriate. So, you know, I just kind of did that. I like just stepped to the side and just kind of took in the room and, you know, watched people as they interacted. And several days later, I realized like I was carrying all of this like emotional content with me, like this, I won't call it baggage. It just felt like I had witnessed something significant and holy. And the only way for me to actually let go of that was to put that in the form of a song. And so even though it wasn't my story, I had witnessed enough of someone else's story to be able to put that in a song. And then I then shared it with someone else who was close to that. And they were like, that actually is exactly, like, I just got an email from the husband, and that's exactly what he said in his email. So, you know, for me, I don't sit down and think about like, what do I want people to think or feel? It's more of like, you know, in the same way a painter would set up their easel at a beautiful sunset. You don't sit down and imagine like, what does a beautiful sunset look like? You experience a beautiful sunset, and then you do your best to try to capture that, you know,
right.
present to other people so they can now see what you saw.
Yeah. That's such it's kind of like in a way, you're like a keyhole. Like one, you know, you see something, I don't know. It works in my mind. the simile works in my mind. But like I'm seeing, you know, this the keyhole being the old kind of keyhole, right? The old skeleton keyhole where the light actually passes through it. And there's a scene on this side, and the keyhole in the middle can provide at least one element of being able to see portions of what the scene is on the other side, to whoever's on the other side. Anyway, works for me. All right. So now, unmute myself and unpin this, unpin you. And so, Philip, how can people stay in touch with you?
Yeah, the best way is through my Patreon. If you go to phillipfoxmusic.com, there's 2 L's in Philip. That just redirects right to my Patreon page.
That's a good point, because I kept accidentally writing your name as 1L. So there's, yeah, darn those 1L Phillips. So, okay, yes. So, and people need to know that you can get to his Patreon page by typing in Philip with 2 L's, foxmusic.com, and it'll forward over to his Patreon page, which is patreon.com /Philip Fox, which you just said. Okay. And I want people also to know that I think one of the beautiful things about Patreon is, like, you don't have to, there's not a big cash outlay at the beginning, but you can support an artist or other whatever person with even a few dollars a month. Like, and Philip has a system set up where you can, like, if you donate such and such money, or you start giving, so you can either donate, right? You can flat out donate a one-time thing if you want to, but you can also become a subscriber. And if you do, like, if you subscribe so and so many dollars a month, you get one song release party and that song. And it kind of goes up from there, as you might expect. There's different kind of tiers, but there's a lot of different tiers and different little packages, so to speak, that you can get. And so you're supporting someone that you want to see them be able to do more. You want to support that happening. It's not breaking your bank. It's really helping their bank. And you're helping them to be able to have the time to create, and which is going to benefit you in the end and benefit the rest of the world. Now, Philip, we didn't discuss this ahead of time. Do you have
I do.
Oh, okay, very good. So the question is, do you have a gift for those watching or listening to this interview? So would you tell us about what that is and why you thought it would be a helpful thing for singers?
Absolutely. Yeah, so every month with my patrons that Natalie was just describing, I release a song directly to them. It doesn't go on Spotify. It doesn't go on Apple Music. It's delivered nowhere else in the world. It goes directly to my patrons. We get together for 30 minutes in an online sort of chat thing like this. I just talk for a few minutes about what's been going on. We listen to the song live together. That's like the live release of the song. And then we spent about 15 minutes afterwards just talking about the production. You know, they ask questions about lyrics and, you know, the ideas. And I talk about what it was like to record and make and write and whatever. We just like kind of have an open forum conversation. So I would like to share one of those kind of behind the scenes release events with your listeners for the latest song that I just released this month in March. It's called All That's Mine Is Yours. And the conversation and the back end of that I thought was pretty lively and was very well received by my patrons. So I'd love to share that song and that, you know, release event with your listeners.
That is awesome. Thank you. That is very cool. I will say, for folks to know, Philip has a YouTube channel too, and you've put from time to time. I've listened to a release party. It may or may not be the exact same thing, but you can get you just like fill out the form so you can get this, okay? Get this from Philip today. But also, in addition to that, you ought to go to Philip's YouTube and just listen to a lot of the recordings that he's got on there and some of those conversations that he had with the growing community, the community that he's growing around his music and just kind of the thoughts on artistry in general. So thank you. That's really awesome. I appreciate it. And so that is going to be something that will be accessible it's going to be either this way or that way. But there will be a form and you just fill it out. And in so doing, I want people to know Philip is going to receive your email address. Okay, so he'll eventually end up with your email address and your first name, which are the two blanks in there. Nothing more, no more commitment than that. And he'll eventually get those so that you can, he can stay in touch with you. You can stay in touch with him. Philip, do you have an email list that you maintain?
I do, yes.
Okay, so, and just so people know, like I'm sure more and more people are familiar with this whole concept, but you can unsubscribe at any time, just like you can unsubscribe from my list at any time you want. But I know that I speak for, I'm sure that I speak for Philip and myself that I strive to provide you with things that are going to benefit you and help you grow as a singer, as a person, as an artist. So hopefully you won't unsubscribe, but you can at any time. You're never locked in. Legally, you can't be locked in. So, everybody, Philip's information is also going to be on this page, so you can look it up there as well. And you've already got his URL and his Patreon information, and you know about his YouTube channel. So I hope you're going to take advantage of those and also go ahead and complete this little form and get exclusive access to what his Patreon patrons only receive. So that'll be pretty awesome. So, all right. Thank you so much, Philip, and bless you and your family. And thank you, A Higher Note community, for joining us today and just for being part of this community. Appreciate you and look forward to hearing from you. I hope that you will stay in touch, that you'll let me know what's going on with you and with you developing your craft. And as we've spoken today, if any of you feel like, wow, I feel like maybe I fall into that category of artist, like there's something in me that keeps bubbling up and I want to be able to focus on that. I mean, Philip would be an awesome connection for you to make. So there you go. Thanks for being here. Have a great day.
Thanks, Natalie.